The wind howled a primeval scream, a constant, brutal companion, at 8,800 meters on Mount Everest. Lincoln Hall's face, a landscape of frost and pain, was barely discernible beneath the layers of his expedition gear. His oxygen mask, once a lifeline, now hung askew, useless. His gloved hand, thick and unresponsive, slipped from the fixed rope. His eyes, once alive with the fire of ambition, were glazed, distant, already staring into the abyss. He collapsed, a heavy, silent heap against the relentless ice. The two Sherpas, cheering Dorj and Tenbach, tried to rouse him. Their faces, weathered by years on the unforgiving mountain, were etched with bewildered desperation. They shook. Him slapped his cheeks gently, their voices swallowed by the gale. Lincoln was unresponsive, a puppet with severed strings, shivering uncontrollably, even as his core temperature plummeted. He was a dead weight, impossible to move. The sun, a cold, indifferent orb, began its slow, agonizing descent, casting long, menacing shadows across the summit. Night was coming, and with it, the absolute certainty of death. Months earlier, the warmth of the Australian sun had bathed Lincoln Hall's kitchen in a deceptive glow. He sat, robust and full of life, poring over maps, the scent of coffee mingling with the faint aroma of adventure. His wife Barbara watched him, her kind eyes clouded with a familiar worry. Their sons, Dylan and Dorian, teenagers on the cusp of adulthood, half listened from the breakfast table. "Are you really going back, Lincoln, after all these years?" Barbara's voice was soft, laced with an unspoken plea. Lincoln looked up, a familiar glint in his eye, the fire of a dream reignited. "Everest calls, Barb. It always has. This time, with Adventure Consultants. Good team. And no, I'm not attempting the North Face again. Standard route?" He offered a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his wife's anxious gaze. "Dad, aren't you a bit old for this?" Dylan's teenage bluntness hung in the air. Lincoln chuckled, a deep, resonant sound. "Old. I'm seasoned. Besides, I owe it to myself. 35 years since that first attempt. This is about finishing what I started." His gaze drifted back to the maps, tracing invisible lines up the world's highest peak. In April 2006, the vibrant chaos of Everest Base Camp buzzed with a nervous energy. Prayer flags, a kaleidoscope of color, fluttered against the stark backdrop of the Himalayas. Sherpas laughed, their camaraderie a stark contrast to the grim determination etched on the climbers' faces. Lincoln, now leaner, his skin tanned by the harsh mountain sun, stood with his new team, Russ, the pragmatic expedition leader, cheering Dorj, the calm, immensely strong lead Sherpa, and Tenbach, a younger Sherpa, eager and respectful. "Acclimatization's going well. Lincoln, you're strong for your age. Good lungs," Russ observed, a note of pleasant surprise in his voice. Lincoln grinned. "Still got it, Russ. Just a bit slower on the descent these days." A self-deprecating laugh, masking the immense physical toll already being taken. Cheering Dorj nodded respectfully. "Lincoln La is strong. He respects the mountain." A high compliment from a man who understood the mountain's temperament intimately. By May 20, the team had reached Camp 3, tents clinging precariously to the icy expanse of the lot's face. Night had fallen, and headlamps flickered like distant stars as climbers made their final preparations for the summit push. Lincoln checked his oxygen tank, the hiss of the gas, a stark reminder of the thin air awaiting them. "This is it," he thought. "All those years, all those climbs, it comes down to this." The dawn of May 25th brought a brutal beauty to the South Col. The sun crested, bathing the peak in a fleeting golden light, illuminating a landscape of jagged rock and treacherous ice. Lincoln and his team, connected by ropes, moved as one, each step deliberate, agonizing. The air was thin, biting, stripping the warmth from their lungs. Every breath was a conscious effort, every muscle screaming in protest. Yet, the summit, a distant, shimmering promise, seemed within reach. The dream was so close he could almost taste it. The cruel reality of the death zone bore down on Lincoln Hall, slumped against the unyielding rock at Mushroom Rock. His body convulsed with uncontrollable shivering. His mind, once sharp and focused, was now a kaleidoscope of fractured thoughts and desperate hallucinations. "Barb, so cold," he mumbled, his voice a raw whisper, reaching out to a phantom vision of his wife. Cheering Dorj's face, etched with concern, tried to press the oxygen mask back to Lincoln's face, but Lincoln fought him, a wild, delirious struggle against his own lifeline. "Lincoln La is very bad, brain swelling, cannot move." Cheering Dorj's voice was strained with desperation as he turned to Russ, the expedition leader. Russ's face was grim, his eyes flicking from his watch to the distant mocking summit. "We have another climber. Summiting, we cannot risk everyone. It's almost dark. We have tried for hours." The words were clipped, heavy with the weight of an impossible decision. He knew the cost of staying. He knew the cost of leaving. Back at the bustling radio tent in Everest Base Camp, the static and crackle of the radio filled the strained silence. Russ's voice, now devoid of its usual authority, was strained as he spoke into the receiver. Barbara's hysterical sobs tore through the airwaves on the other end. "He's unresponsive. Barbara, delusional. We've exhausted all options. We carried him for hours. There's no way to get him down. Russ's voice broke on the last words. The admission of defeat, a bitter pill. No, you can't just leave him. Barbara's voice was a primal scream of disbelief and agony. I'm so sorry, Barbara. It's an impossible situation. We made the call. He's gone. Confirmed dead. Russ's voice was barely a whisper. The finality of the words, a hammer blow. The call was made. Lincoln Hall was dead. This agonizing decision, made under the most extreme conditions imaginable, would haunt them all. On Mount Everest, at 8,800 meters, night descended, a shroud of icy darkness. A brutal wind howled its mournful dirge, whipping snow around Lincoln's still form. His eyes were closed, his breathing imperceptible. The camera slowly pulled back, revealing him utterly alone, a solitary, snow-covered mound on the vast, unforgiving expanse of the mountain. He was motionless, a frozen monument to human ambition and the mountain's cruel indifference. The climbing world mourned. The media reported his death. For 24 hours, the highest peak on Earth was his tomb. Out of reach, out of sight, out of mind. The sun, a mocking orb, began its ascent on May 26, painting the frigid peaks of Everest in cold hues. Its first rays struck Lincoln Hall's snow-covered form, lying utterly still on the exposed rock. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his body. Then, agonizingly, his eyes slowly, painfully, opened. He blinked, confused, disoriented. The world a blurry, white-hot canvas of pain. A raspy whisper escaped his lips. What? He tried to move. Agony ripped through him. His muscles screamed. His joints locked. The realization dawned, slow and chilling. He was alone. No team. Familiar faces. His oxygen mask was gone. His gloves nowhere to be found. His face, exposed to the elements for over 24 hours, was a raw, peeling mess of frostbite and sun exposure. The bitter truth settled in his gut like a stone. They left me. His mind, reeling from cerebral edema, flickered between lucidity and delirium. He saw his children, Dylan and Dorian, their faces etched with concern. He saw Barbara, her smile a beacon of warmth against the biting cold. These apparitions spurred him on. He struggled to his feet, a ghostly figure rising from the snow, barely, clad in the tattered remains of his outer shell. Each movement was a Herculean effort. He stumbled, falling face first into the ice, then pushed himself back up, his body screaming in protest. He slid down steep sections of ice, sharp rocks tearing at his clothes and skin. An instinct, deep and primal, guided his hand to his ice axe, still miraculously near him. He clutched it, a fragile anchor in a world turned upside down. I'm not dead, he screamed, his raw voice swallowed by the relentless wind. Not yet. Hours later, as the sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows, Lincoln's spectral figure was spotted. Dan Mazur, an American expedition leader, and his Sherpa team were ascending towards the summit. They stopped dead in their tracks, frozen in disbelief. Was it a ghost? A hallucination brought on by the thin air? The figure moved, stumbled, then righted itself. My God, it's a ghost, Dan whispered, his breath clouding in the sub-zero air. Lincoln, barely conscious, forced out the words. I'm Lincoln Hall. I'm from Venture Consultants. The words were hoarse, almost unintelligible, but they pierced the mountain's silence with the impossible truth. Dan didn't hesitate. He looked at his Sherpas, his decision clear. We have to help him. We're turning back. The summit, their lifelong dream, instantly forgotten. The mountain had presented a different challenge. Dan's team sprang into action, their movements swift and practiced. They carefully administered oxygen, the life-giving gas hissing into Lincoln's ravaged lungs. Water, a precious commodity, was offered. Then more. Lincoln drank greedily, the liquid a shock to his parched throat. He was still profoundly disoriented, oscillating between moments of stark clarity and the terrifying grip of delusion. He recounted his hallucinations to his bewildered rescuers. The blue elephant, it kept me warm, he mumbled, convinced of its comforting presence. Just focus on moving, Lincoln. One step, that's all, Don urged, his voice calm, steady, cutting through the chaos in Lincoln's mind. They began the agonizing process of rigging a makeshift harness, preparing for the impossible task of lowering a near-dead man down the world's most treacherous slope. The sun was already beginning its slow arc towards the west, threatening to plunge them back into the brutal darkness that Lincoln had so miraculously survived. The descent was an ordeal of unimaginable proportions. Don Mazur's team, joined by other Sherpas who had heard the impossible news of Lincoln Hall's resurrection, painstakingly lowered him down the treacherous slopes. Each foot of progress was a battle against gravity, against the thinning oxygen, against Lincoln's fragile hold on consciousness. The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging them back into the inky blackness. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the raw courage and sheer willpower of everyone involved. Lincoln, though, barely clinging to life, felt a small flame of defiance ignite within him, every nerve ending screaming, but a small flame, life. In the face of my son, Dorian, urging me on. Finally, after an eternity, they dragged Lincoln into a tent at Camp 4. He was exhausted, severely frostbitten, his face a swollen, blackened mask, but he was breathing. Doctors, alerted to the miracle, rushed to his side, their movements precise and urgent. News of his survival spread like wildfire across the mountain, down to base camp, and then, astonishingly, around the world. The man declared dead had risen. 2 days later, at advanced base camp, Lincoln, heavily bandaged, his eyes swollen to slits but holding a faint, almost imperceptible smile, experienced a reunion that transcended words. Barbara rushed to him, her body shaking with sobs as she embraced him fiercely. His sons, Dylan and Dorian, stood beside her, their faces a mixture of awe, disbelief, and profound relief. "I thought you were gone," Barbara choked out, her voice muffled against his chest. "Not yet, Barb, not yet," Lincoln whispered, his voice raspy but imbued with an incredible strength as he clutched her hand. He was alive. Scarred, broken, but alive. Months passed. Back in the warmth of his Sydney home, Lincoln, still recovering, sat in his living room. He had lost most of his fingers and toes to frostbite, permanent reminders of his ordeal. He looked out the window, a quiet contemplation on his face, the vastness of the mountain replaced by the mundane beauty of his garden. "They said I had a second chance, a miracle, and maybe it was. But the mountain, it leaves its mark, not just on the body, but on the soul." Lincoln's voice narrated, softer now, but resonant with newfound wisdom. "I faced death, and I woke up to a different life, a life where every breath is a gift." Years later, an older, distinguished Lincoln Hall stood before a rapt audience at a public speaking event. He wore a suit, but his hands, missing digits, were visible as he gestured. His voice, calm and resonant, filled the room. Double quotes, ... And so, when I woke up, alone, on the roof of the world, I knew one thing. I was not ready to die. And sometimes, that's all the reason you need. He paused, a slight, knowing smile playing on his lips. A man who had stared into the abyss and walked back. This story of survival is just one of many we explore on Out of Reach. If you found Lincoln Hall's incredible journey inspiring, be sure to check out our channel for more tales of pushing the boundaries of human endurance. What do you think sustained Lincoln Hall during his miraculous survival? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.